You've certainly heard that number, 3,752. It's a number that sounds almost unbelievable. 3,752 enemy aircraft destroyed. You've probably also seen the unmistakable silhouette of the Republic P-47 Thunderbolt, that enormous, robust, almost brutal American fighter. And perhaps you've wondered, like me, how such a large aircraft, often called the Juggernaut, achieved such an impressive combat record? You feel this curiosity, this desire to understand what made it so deadly, and perhaps a tinge of frustration at never having found the full story, the engineering history behind the myth. You've probably read that it had 8 machine guns, but what does that really mean? How did one engineer, one man, manage to fit the firepower of an anti-aircraft battery into the wings of a fighter? You imagine the difficulties, the weight, the recoil, the space. Most stories focus on the pilots, the aces, but you want to know what's behind the scenes. You want to understand the engineering decision, the design challenge that Alexander Carvelli faced. You seek the story of the metal, the projects, the problems, and the ingenious solutions that led to this resounding success. The pain you feel is that of superficial information. You read 8.50 caliber machine guns and nod, but your mind yearns for more. How were they installed? Why 8 and not 6, like the P-51? What was the real tactical impact of this choice? Were there drawbacks? You're tired of documentaries that gloss over the technology, that treat the weapons as magical footnotes. You want the process, the engineer's struggle against physics, weight, and the limitations of the material. This video is the answer you've been looking for. We won't just tell the story of the P-47, we'll dissect the engineering behind its weapons. We'll delve into the mind of Alexander Carvelli, the brilliant Georgian designer who bet everything on firepower and power. We'll explore the nearly impossible engineering challenge of integrating 8 Browning M2 South, their ammunition, and their feed systems into a functional wing. This is the true story of how a bold design decision created a legend that dominated the skies and changed the course of aerial warfare. If you're the kind of person who sees a fighter plane and thinks about the engineering behind it, this is your channel. Consider subscribing now as we dive deep into the innovations that actually won the war. Join our community of true military history enthusiasts. The morning of December 11, 1943, was bitterly cold at 28,000 feet over Emden, on Germany's northwest coast. Captain Robert S. Johnson of the 56th Fighter Group adjusted his oxygen mask, feeling the constant vibration of his P-47C Thunderbolt, nicknamed Half Pint. The morning sun glinted off the metal of the 8th Air Force B. 17 bombers he and his squadron were tasked with protecting. The air was thin and crystal clear, but the calm was an illusion about to be shattered by the fury of the Luftwaffe. Suddenly, the radio came alive with tense shouts. "Bandits, 11 o'clock, coming from above!" Johnson turned his head, his heart pounding against his ribs. Black dots dipped from the sun, rapidly growing into the dreaded silhouettes of Focke-Wulf 190s, the agile German fighters. The sky, once empty, transformed into a 3-dimensional chaos of smoke trails, tracer fire, and desperately maneuvering planes. The escort mission had become a fight for survival. Johnson singled out an FW-190 that was latching onto the tail of a B-17. He pushed the stick forward, and the 7-ton Jug accelerated into a shallow but incredibly fast dive. The German pilot didn't see it. Johnson lined up the enemy in his K-14 gyroscopic sight. His thumbs hovered over the fire button on the control stick. He wasn't about to fire 2 cannons or 4 machine guns. He was about to unleash the full firepower of 8.50 caliber Browning M2 machine guns, Carvelli's engineering solution to any tactical problem. To understand how Robert Johnson arrived at that moment, we need to go back to 1939. The United States Army Air Corps observing the war in Europe was in a panic. Their main fighters, such as the P-39 and P-40, were outclassed by the German Messerschmitt Bf 109s, especially at altitude. They needed a high-altitude interceptor, and fast. Republic Aviation's first concept, led by engineer Alexander Carvelli, was the AP-10, a light fighter with an Allison engine. But the U.S. AAC rejected it, wanting something more. Legend has it that Carvelli, a Georgian immigrant who fled the Russian Revolution, returned to his drawing board with a new philosophy. Informed by the lessons of the Battle of Britain, he realized that survival, speed at altitude, and firepower were more important than pure agility. He reportedly took a piece of paper and drew a massive circle for the new 2,000 horsepower Pratt & Whitney R2800 double Wasp engine and another for the complex turbocharger system. The aircraft, he decided, would be built around this powertrain. But the engine was just the beginning. The new requirement called for devastating firepower. Carvelli decided that his new fighter, the XP-47B, would carry not 4, not 6, but 8.5 caliber machine guns. This was an engineering decision that defined the entire project. The Browning M2 was no small weapon. It was a heavy machine gun, firing a 12.7 millimeters round that could tear through light armor, destroy engines, and set fuel tanks ablaze. 8 of these represented unprecedented firepower for a fighter. The engineering challenge was monumental. Where to place 8 M2 guns, their massive ammunition racks holding up to 425 rounds per gun, and the complex belt feed mechanisms? The fuselage was completely filled. The armored cockpit, the massive R2800 engine, the fuel tanks, and crucially, the intricate turbocharger ducts running from the plane's belly to the engine, occupied every cubic inch of space. The answer, therefore, had to be the wing. Carvelli had to design a large, thick wing, not only to generate the lift needed to lift the heaviest fighter aircraft ever conceived, but also to serve as a weapons bay. The weapons couldn't simply be placed side by side. Republic engineers had to create a staggered arrangement. The weapons were mounted at different heights and longitudinal positions within the wing, like steps, to allow the ammunition belts to curve smoothly from the ammunition boxes to the gun chambers. This arrangement was a masterpiece of three-dimensional packaging. The innermost gun was positioned higher and further forward, while the outermost gun was positioned lower and further back. This ensured that the ammunition belts, which were extremely heavy and prone to jamming under high G-forces, could be fed reliably. The wing structure itself had to be massively reinforced to handle the cumulative recoil of 8 heavy machine guns firing simultaneously, at a combined rate of about 100 rounds per second. When the XP-47B first flew on May 6, 1941, test pilots were perplexed. The plane was gigantic, weighing nearly twice as much as a Spitfire. Early pilots nicknamed it the Juggernaut, or simply Jug, due to its shape. Initially, many USAF pilots hated it. Accustomed to the agile P-40s, they found the P-47 slow in climb and cumbersome to control. They called it the 7-ton truck and feared it would be an easy target for the nimble German fighters. They were wrong, for they misunderstood the doctrine for which Carvelli had designed it. The P-47 was not a low-altitude knife fighter. It was a high-altitude gladiator. Thanks to its turbocharger, its performance at altitudes above 25,000 feet was exceptional. The correct tactic was boom and zoom, using the plane's weight and power to dive at incredible speeds, sometimes approaching the speed of sound, unleash that devastating volley, and use the retained energy to climb back to the safety of altitude. And this volley was the crucial point. Pilots described the effect of the 8M2S as a chainsaw. The shells were harmonized to converge on a single point, usually about 300 meters in front of the aircraft. When a pilot pulled the trigger, he wasn't firing. He was creating a concentrated wall of metal and explosives. 1 second of accurate fire was enough. Enemy fighters, even the robust FW-190s, simply disintegrated under this punishment. This level of engineering detail, the struggle to make ammunition belts work under 7 gigaseconds, is what makes this story so fascinating. If you're also passionate about these behind-the-scenes technical details, show your support by liking this video. It helps us know we're on the right track, bringing you the kind of in-depth content you're looking for about World War II engineering. Alexander Carvelli designed the P-47 not just to be deadly, but to be survivable. He knew his pilots would face anti-aircraft fire and enemy cannon fire. The massive R-2800 air-cooled radial engine was a key advantage. Unlike liquid-cooled engines like the P-51's Merlin or the Bf-109's DB-605, the Double Wasp could sustain severe combat damage, lose entire cylinders, and still remain operational, bringing the pilot home. The fuselage was equally robust, with heavy armor plates around the cockpit and redundant systems. This gave the Jug pilots immense confidence. They knew their plane could absorb an incredible amount of punishment. This toughness, combined with overwhelming firepower, created a fighter that changed the psychology of aerial combat. German pilots quickly learned to fear a frontal attack by a P-47, as it was suicidal. The 56th Fighter Group, led by Hubert Hub Zenk, was the first unit to take the P-47 into combat in Europe. Nicknamed Zemk's Wolfpack, they were tasked with developing tactics for the new fighter. They refined the high-speed dive and climb. Pilots like Robert Johnson and Francis Gabby Gabreski began racking up kills, proving Cartvelli's philosophy correct. Gabreski would become the top American ace in Europe with 28 victories, most of them in the P-47. However, early models, such as the P-47C and the D Razorback, suffered from a significant flaw. The high rear fuselage created a dangerous blind spot. Pilots couldn't see what was directly behind them, a deadly vulnerability in aerial combat. Engineering had to respond once again. The solution, inspired by the British Hawker Typhoon, was the bubble canopy. Starting with the P-47D-25 model, Republic cut the rear spine of the fuselage and installed a transparent acrylic canopy that offered the pilot 360-degree visibility. This was perhaps the aircraft's most significant upgrade. Now, the P-47 had it all. It had high speed, phenomenal diving speed, legendary endurance, perfect visibility, and, of course, the 8M2 machine guns. It became the ultimate weapons platform. It was this combination that led to the impressive numbers. In the European Theater of Operations, ETO, P-47s of the 8th and 9th Air Forces were credited with destroying 3,752 enemy aircraft in the air. This number is a direct testament to the effectiveness of Carvelli's design. For a significant period, the P-47 held the record for most aerial kills of any Allied fighter in the ETO, even surpassing the P-51 Mustang. But the genius of Cartvelli's design was revealed in a second role. When Allied forces landed in Normandy in June 1944, the war changed. The need for high-altitude air superiority diminished, and the need for close air support became paramount. The P-47, with its robustness and payload capacity, proved to be the best ground attack fighter bomber of the war, outperforming aircraft designed specifically for that role. The Jug could carry a bomb load rivaling that of early war light bombers. It could be equipped with over 2,500 pounds of bombs or 10 5-inch Hevar rockets. Most importantly, its 8 50-caliber machine guns were perfect tools of destruction. They were used to strafe truck columns, artillery positions, locomotives, and even the thinnest upper armor of German tanks. The air-cooled radial engine was key to this role. P-47 pilots flew low and slow over the battlefield, facing a hellish barrage of light anti-aircraft fire. Where a P-51 or Spitfire would be downed by a single hit to its cooling system, the P-47 could come home looking like a jigsaw puzzle with gaping holes in its wings and fuselage, but with the pilot unharmed. Carvelli's survival engineering saved countless lives. Carvelli's decision to use 8 guns had an unexpected benefit in this ground attack role. The weight of the 12.7 mm volley was sufficient to puncture truck engines or detonate ammunition wagons. Pilots refer to this as sweeping the road. The gun platform designed for air-to-air combat at 30,000 feet proved to be the perfect tool for destroying Wehrmacht logistics on the ground. It's interesting to note how a design can evolve beyond its original conception. The P-47 went from interceptor to long-range escort fighter, and finally to the king of ground attack. What do you think was the P-47's most vital contribution to the Allied victory? Was it protecting the B-17 bombers, or destroying the German army on the ground after D-Day? Leave your opinion in the comments below, as it's a fascinating debate. Meanwhile, in the Pacific Theater of Operations, the P-47 was also proving its worth, albeit in a different way. Over the vast expanses of ocean and jungle, the Jug's reliability and ruggedness were even greater advantages. An engine failure in a single-engine fighter over Europe meant a forced landing. Over the Pacific, it meant certain death. Pilots relied on the AR-2A00 engine to get them there and back. Against Japanese fighters like the agile A6M0, the P-47's tactics were even more crucial. The Zero could outmaneuver the P-47 in any horizontal maneuver. But the P-47 was much faster in a dive and much more resilient. Once again, the 8M2 machine guns made the difference. The Zero was notoriously fragile, lacking pilot armor or self-sealing fuel tanks. A brief burst from the 8M2S was enough to make the Japanese fighter explode in a ball of fire. The comparison with the P-51 Mustang is inevitable. The Mustang, with its Merlin engine and superior aerodynamics, had a much longer range, making it the primary bomber escort for deep dive missions over Berlin. The P-51 was the thoroughbred, the P-47 the workhorse, but in terms of raw firepower and ability to survive damage, the Jug was unmatched. Many pilots who flew both types stated that if they had to go into combat, they would prefer the P-47. The P-51 carried 6 M2 machine guns, which was still a formidable armament. But P-47 pilots insisted that their 2 extra guns and the additional ammunition they could carry made a psychological and tactical difference. Alexander Carvelli never stopped innovating. He oversaw the evolution of the P-47 throughout the war. The P-47M was a high-speed version equipped with a more powerful R2800 engine, specifically designed to intercept V-1 flying bombs over England. And the P-47N was an ultra-long-range version with redesigned, larger wings that carried more fuel, designed to escort B-29 bombers over the vast distances of the Pacific. The ETO's 3,752 kills are only part of the picture. When kills from all theaters are combined, the P-47 Thunderbolt is credited with over 7,000 air-to-air victories, and this number is dwarfed by its ground attack achievements. P-47s are estimated to have destroyed over 160,000 vehicles, 9,000 locomotives, and 6,000 armored vehicles and tanks. This is an impressive combat record for a single aircraft type. For Luftwaffe pilots, the P-47 was a nightmare. They nicknamed it Der Dick, the Fat One. They knew they couldn't follow it in a dive, as their aircraft would disintegrate. They knew a head-on attack was suicide. Their only hope was to catch the P-47 at low speed, in a climb, or in a horizontal maneuver. If the Jug pilot managed to lock his sights on a German aircraft, however briefly, the result was almost always fatal. The weapon itself, the Browning M2.50 caliber, is an engineering legend. Designed by John Browning at the end of World War I, it proved so effective that it is still in service today, over 100 years later. Its reliability, penetrating power, and the psychology of its firing sound made it the quintessential American aerial weapon of World War II. Carvelli's decision to field 8 of them was a gamble on the weapon's proven effectiveness. The maintenance engineering behind these weapons was equally critical. Keeping 8 machine guns per plane clean, lubricated, and functioning on muddy, cold airfields in England or France was a Herculean task. Ground crews had to manually load the heavy ammunition belts, which could weigh hundreds of pounds per plane. They also had to harmonize the guns, adjusting their angles so that the projectiles converged perfectly. The logistics of supplying .50 caliber ammunition to thousands of P-47s, each firing 100 rounds per second, were industrial scale. Ammunition production had to be massively increased. Ground crews frequently mixed ammunition belts, alternating between armor-piercing AP rounds for armor, incendiary I rounds for fuel tanks, and tracer T rounds to aid pilot aiming. A common firing sequence was a PIT, ensuring multiple types of target damage. Carville's engineering also extended to production. The P-47, despite its complexity, was designed for mass production. Republic's factories in Farmingdale, New York, and Evansville, Indiana, produced a total of 15,683 Thunderbolts. It was the most produced American fighter during World War II, a feat of industrial engineering that ensured the Allies had the numbers needed to overwhelm the Luftwaffe. Other nations also recognized the design's genius. The Brazilian Air Force, with the 1st Fighter Aviation Group, Senta e Pua, flew the P-47D with distinction in the Italian campaign. Mexico's 201 Squadron also operated the P-47 in the Pacific. Carville's design proved robust and reliable in the hands of various air forces, solidifying its reputation as one of the greatest combat aircraft of all time. The P-47 wasn't a perfect aircraft. Its fuel consumption was high, and its initial range, before external tanks, was limited. Its low-altitude performance wasn't as good as its rivals, but its flaws were overshadowed by its virtues. Carville's design philosophy of prioritizing power, firepower, and endurance was exactly what the Allies needed for the war of attrition they were waging. The insistence on 8 guns rather than the P-51-6 or the P-40s-4 or the European design's mixed cannons was a deliberate choice. Carville wanted saturation fire. He wanted his pilots to have such an overwhelming advantage in firepower that any encounter, no matter how brief, would end in their favor. The engineering complexity involved in achieving this was immense, but the result, 3,752 kills in the ET, alone speaks for itself. Let's consider the logistics of carrying these weapons. A typical P-47D carried 425 rounds for each of the 4 internal guns, and 267 for the 4 external guns, totaling 2,868 rounds. However, many configurations allowed up to 425 rounds for all 8, totaling 3,400 rounds. That's almost 400 kilograms in ammunition for the machine guns alone. This weight was a constant penalty, but it was the price paid for guaranteed target destruction. Maintaining these weapon systems was a constant challenge. The belt feed mechanism, especially for the outermost weapons, was long and complex. In high-G maneuvers, the heavy ammunition belts could twist, causing jams. Republic engineers continually worked to improve the feed mechanisms, introducing electrically assisted systems to aid belt pull and increase reliability, ensuring that all 8 weapons fired when the pilot needed them. The engineering behind the P-47 is a case study in making difficult design decisions. Carville sacrificed lightweight agility for rugged survivability. He sacrificed simplicity for overwhelming firepower. He bet that in modern industrial warfare, the platform that could dish out and take the most punishment would win. He was absolutely right. Isn't it amazing how a single engineering decision, the insistence on 8 guns, could have such a profound impact on the battlefield? The history of warfare is full of such moments. If you know of another engineering innovation from World War II that you think deserves a deep dive like this, let us know in the comments. We're always looking for the next great story to dissect. The climax of the P-47's history and its weapons engineering was not a single air battle, but the Battle of the Bulge in the winter of 1944. When the German offensive began, bad weather kept Allied air forces grounded. But on December 23rd, the skies cleared. What followed was one of the greatest examples of tactical air power in history. Thousands of P-47s loaded with bombs, rockets, and their 8 M2S were launched against German armored columns. German forces were trapped on the narrow roads of the Ardennes with little to no air support. The Jug pilots described the scene as a firing range. They flew low, ignoring anti-aircraft fire, and used their 8 guns to methodically destroy everything that moved. Fuel trucks exploded, tanks were immobilized, and German logistics were disrupted. The firepower Carvelli projected into the sky was now breaking the backbone of Hitler's last major ground offensive. Carvelli's engineering was vindicated in the most brutal way possible. The weapons platform he created proved to be the perfect tool for modern mechanized warfare. The P-47 not only helped sweep the Luftwaffe from the sky, allowing B-17 bombers to hit their targets, but also served as the hammer that stopped the German advance. The 3,752 aerial kills are only half the story. The other half is written in the scorched earth of France and Belgium. The P-47 Thunderbolt changed the way fighters were designed. It proved that a single-engine fighter could be a heavy, robust, and incredibly powerful weapons platform. Alexander Carvelli didn't just design an aircraft. He designed a weapons system. His engineering decision to prioritize firepower and the technical brilliance required to integrate 8 M2 machine guns resulted in one of the most effective war machines ever built. The legacy of the P-47 and its 8 guns is the legacy of the American engineering philosophy itself: more power, more robustness, and more firepower. It marked the pinnacle of the propeller-driven fighter before the jet age took over, but its influence remains. The spiritual successor to the P-47 is the A-10 Thunderbolt II, another Fairchild Republic aircraft also designed around its main weapon, the GAU-8 cannon. The story of Alexander Carvelli and the P-47 is a powerful reminder that war is won on the drawing board as well as on the battlefield. It was a series of bold engineering decisions, a refusal to compromise on firepower and survivability that gave Allied pilots the tool they needed. The number 3,752 is not just a statistic. It is the end result of a brilliantly solved engineering problem. The P-47 Thunderbolt stands as a metal monument to the idea that, when faced with an impossible challenge, the right engineering solution is not just to meet the requirements, but to overwhelmingly exceed them. The jug wasn't elegant, but it was magnificent in its effective brutality. What do you think? Is Carvelli's philosophy of firepower and ruggedness above all else still the winning formula in modern warfare? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments.